Hey guys, what's up? Something I've been thinking about a lot lately. Once in a while, I get a well meaning comment from someone, and they'll be talking about something that I do in a video or something I talk about doing with the final trade business. And they'll make a comment about, like, well, is it really worth your time to do that? You know, and a good example of this is shipping cards in plain white envelopes. And if you're in the direct program on TCG Player, you still get some orders that come through to you to ship in plain white envelopes once in a while. It's not nearly so many as before you go direct, but it's still some. And over time, I've raised my shipping cost, I've raised my minimum card cost to try to cut down on those number of orders that come through to me. But still, I get maybe between 3 and 5 a day on average. And so I still have to get out supplies, pick some individual cards or a couple of cards, and package them up and put a stamp on it and put it with everything else that goes to the post office every day. And someone will say, well, is that worth your time? If you're only charging $2.50 for shipping and the supplies and the postage and the sales fee and everything is, say, I don't know, $1.20 or something. You charge $2.50 for shipping, and then you make the money for the cards themselves based on what the person buys. And my response to that is, well, doing plain white envelope orders is kind of the penalty for being in the direct program, right? You still have to do some once in a while. But the other response is, it's kind of necessary. And I know people mean well when they say these things, when they say, well, why don't, instead of doing that, you just go drive Uber for a few hours? Or, some people, if they're maybe not being so generous, they'll say something like, why don't you just flip hamburgers instead? And the reason you don't is because your business is a network. And if you've watched Final Trade for any length of time, you know that I go on and on about networks, but I think it's a very valuable concept. And mostly it's the term I had coined was network value theory of TCG investing, that explains how you have the creator of the game, you have distributors, retailers, box breakers, secondary sellers, you have players, collectors, investors. You have all the people involved around in a game, and that's the network, and that's what gives a game its value, and that's why games like MetaZoo failed, is they were missing essential portions of the network, and it's why I continue to remain skeptical on games like One Piece and Sorcery, is because they have not yet proven that they can assemble the entire network with sufficient strength. But when it comes to your business, the network looks a little different. You, of course, have your business, the legal entity, you have yourself, you have customers, you have products, but you also have things like knowledge and relationships, business deals. You have inventory, and you have business process, you have intellectual property, and you have all these things that a business builds up that have value, that work together. And yes, if I go and I fill some plain white envelope orders, maybe it doesn't buy a lot of goodwill. It's very unlikely that there are a lot of buyers on TCG Player who, even though I get a lot of feedback on the site that say that I have top-notch packaging because I spend a lot of money on the packaging and I also charge a lot for the shipping, even though I get a lot of those good feedbacks for the packaging and how I treat even a 10-cent card that I ship, there probably aren't a lot of buyers on there who are saying, I'm going to go back to Final Trade for the next card because the packaging is so good. It's probably very, very few. And so maybe it doesn't pay off to spend the effort on the packaging. But the thing is, what also doesn't pay off is customer service problems and having to waste all the time to resolve a customer service problem on a 10-cent card. And you can't just tell the buyer to go F off. You have to take care of them because TCG Player wants to keep a good marketplace up. And if you just refund the order and block them, you're going to get bad feedback. It's going to look bad for you. Eventually, that might affect you. So there's something else, though, when it comes to your business as a network, and that's that you never know when you're building your business, and certainly I haven't as I've built Final Trade over the last 3 years. You never know where effort in one part of the business will pay off somewhere else. And so a good example of that is I've made a lot of YouTube videos. I've made about 700 YouTube videos. And especially in the beginning, a lot of them got single digit views. it was probably, I don't know, it was probably a month or two that I had been making YouTube videos back in 2021 before the first person ever left a comment and I got some interaction. And so those early efforts do not pay anything in a vacuum, but they help to start building the network. And you don't know where it's going to go. You don't know when that video that you think is just another run-of-the-mill video captures a viewer who then goes on to be an early patron, who then buys tons of product, who then offers a business relationship with you on which you then make a lot of money. You don't know when anything like that is going to come out of some seemingly low value effort that you're doing for your business. And now, when I open singles, this is another good example. When I open boxes to sell for singles, sometimes I'm making $100 an hour off of that. And I know people will act skeptical of that, but once in a while you can buy some really good collector boxes that maybe have $80 to $90 of profit in them, and you're only handling 180 cards in a collector box to make that $80 or $90. And if you're just blasting through box after box, ripping packs, you can open a 12-pack collector box in 4 minutes, probably less. And that includes doing the initial sort of foils and non-foils. And then, as when you're sorting all the rest from that box break, you're sorting pretty quickly and you gain certain economies of scale. And even then, when you go to pick cards and sell them later on, you're typically picking multiple copies of the same card at a time and getting rid of them. And so you may end up spending a hair less than an hour all time on one of those collector boxes, and you make $80 or $90 of profit over it. And the ratio will come out to about $100 an hour. Now, I know some more obnoxious people will say, well, Craig, why don't you just do that? And it's like, well, yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to have an unlimited supply of collector boxes that have $80 to $90 of profit in them, that have unlimited sales velocity on TCG Player, so that all day long I could do nothing but that. Yeah, I'd buy 2 TCG Player sorting robots today. I'd hire some people and I would do nothing but oversee them working on it all the time. But you can't do that. There is no unlimited supply of those boxes. The sales velocity and the market volume just is not enough to support that. So you don't always get to make $100 an hour selling singles. More often, you make less. Sometimes, depending on what your lower thresholds are for the kinds of boxes you open and how much profit you're looking to get from them, sometimes you're making $25, $30 an hour. And I kind of cut it off there. But you don't always get to do the high value thing for your business. Sometimes toilets have to be scrubbed. And if you have any type of physical location in the real world with a toilet, you know that sometimes it's got to be scrubbed as part of your business. And I know someone will say, Craig, why don't you hire somebody who makes minimum wage to scrub that toilet? Well, there's other overhead that comes with hiring people. There's compliance burdens and regulatory burdens, and there's you don't actually just get the person for 20 minutes to come in and clean the bathroom, and you pay them for 1/3 of an hour's work at $7.50 an hour. You don't get that. You don't get to pay $2.50 to get that toilet scrub because, one, they won't commit to the job for less than a certain threshold number of hours. And then if you pay somebody $7.50 an hour to be a janitor, you have other benefit costs. You have unemployment insurance costs and compliance costs and bookkeeping costs and shrinkage and all these other things that go along with it. So it's not so simple as, well, just hire someone who's cheap. Sometimes the cheapest overall cost is to do it yourself. And even in a business where you're sometimes doing great activities that make huge amounts of money, you have to do those low value activities. Sometimes I have to sit here on my laptop and I have to buy packing tape from Amazon. Or I set it up on a subscribe and save, but nonetheless, I have to make an accounting in the books that say, okay, Amazon's billed me this month for packing tape. And that's a low value thing. And like I said, at the other end of the spectrum, sometimes you're making $100 an hour to open singles. Sometimes I have a 2 or 3 hour patron sealed sale and I can make hundreds or close to $1,000 of profit off of that in a couple hours. But I had to lay the groundwork for that. I had to build the network that supports that. And later, I have to go tape boxes together to ship the packages. I have to wrap up the boxes in bubble wrap. I have to print labels and affix those to the boxes. I have to drive them to the post office. So you can't always be doing those super high value things. And beyond just needing to do the low value things in a business in order to build the network, sometimes you do things that lose money. Sometimes it just, in the general case of business, you take a client out to lunch and you wine and dine them and you build that relationship and you hope that the goodwill you're buying by doing that thing today will pay off in the future. And typically, yes, it will in the long run on the whole. A good example of this is my dad was a successful small businessman. For 30 years, he ran a small business and he kind of achieved the American dream thing, right? He paid his bills, he raised his family, and he employed people for 30 years until he retired. And in that time period, one of the things he would always do with his business is he had a refrigerator in the shop and he had food in it. And he had a table next to it and he had candy bar and chips and bags of microwave popcorn. And in the freezer, he had TV dinners and ice cream and just crap like that. And he enjoyed buying it for his employees and for other people who would come into the shop. And so he got a reputation with the FedEx driver and the UPS driver and the long haul truckers who would bring in pallets of products. And they would come in, and some of those guys, depending on how outgoing they were, they might go in there and they would put a TV dinner in the microwave, and then they would get the pallet jack and they would deliver his order of stuff. And then they would eat the TV dinner, and then they would go back to driving their truck to the next delivery. Now, what was the value to him of doing those tasks of buying that food and putting it out there for people to take for free? It had negative value on just a dollar basis, but it bought goodwill. It built the network. It made sure that when it was raining or when it was near the end of the day and he was the last person on their delivery route, they went ahead and made sure to get to him. And so not everything you do in a business is a high value task. You will have tasks that you have to do that range all up and down the value chain. And what you hope for is that overall, the tasks that on average achieve some minimum amount of value that make it worthwhile to you, that are a good use of your time and that are better than the alternatives. But if you simply say this one isolated task, I'm better just going and driving Uber than doing this, well, you're not going to have any packing tape. You're going to have a dirty toilet and you're going to have a lot of other problems in your business. So sometimes you have to do the shitty jobs in your business. Sometimes you have to do the low value stuff to enable it so that once in a while you can do the high value tasks. And I guess Rudy is a really good example of this. You know, he will run his sales to his patrons, and it's not unheard of, just given the kind of rough numbers he throws out, making some educated guesses, that on some of those sales, he's making $100,000, $150,000 of profit in 10, 20 minutes sometimes while he runs the sale. But that ignores the network that he's built up and the work he does and the employees he has working for him, all the overhead, the infrastructure, the warehousing, the business relationships, the capital, all the other years of work and everything else that create that network so that in those 30 minutes, he can appear to make $150,000 of profit. It requires the whole network and it requires you to do all the work. So, you know, if people look at what you're doing and they say something like, why don't you just flip burgers instead? Because they have this narrow vision, this tunnel vision looking at the one task they see you doing, just don't worry about it. Just think about your business overall, what you're doing in aggregate, and where that's taking you. So I've done a lot of tasks in Final Trade's past where, yeah, in a silo, they weren't worthwhile, but they built a network. They built the patron program. They built the YouTube channel. They built the subscriber base. They built business relationships and opportunities. They built capital and they built inventory. And now Final Trade is accelerating like I can't believe. So keep at it, guys. Thanks to everyone who makes this content possible, especially my very generous supporters on Patreon. Like, comment, share, and subscribe, and join me on Final Trade.